So good afternoon and welcome to our 4 o'clock session. Welcome. This session, our final session of the day for the ACER curriculum, is on leadership and leadership traits, which would be timely given the theme of the conference being leadership and transformation. We have 3 pillars of our radiology field today: Dr. Chertoff, Dr. Collins, and Dr. Nadich. We're going to start with Dr. Chertoff speaking on how to manage up.
Can I make that bigger? Or?
For you, I don't know if you can make it bigger.
Okay.
Well, you got the Zoom right there.
No, it's okay. Okay. I think I'll just a very short pillar. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak, and what I'm going to talk about is how to manage up effectively as a leader. So what is managing up? It's building a successful working relationship with a superior, a manager, or an employer, and it should not be this, which is an example of somebody manipulating their boss. And here is this incredibly brain-unfriendly, Petra, list of a million things, and I can just see all of you thinking like, oh my God, she's not going to read that, and worse, she's not going to go through all those things. And I'm not going to go through any of those things really, because I really hate the expression managing up. I just implied to you that it wasn't really manipulation, but I'm not really convinced that it isn't manipulation. As a matter of fact, I think it is manipulation. So what I really want to talk about is not how to manage up, but how to manage in an academic workplace. And the reason is because, when I think about this, managing up is really not any different than any other working relationship. There is a power differential, but essentially it's the same process. So when you think about what really motivates all of us in the academic workplace, and this may not be true in all workplaces, although when I think about it, I think it probably is. I've started to read this book by Daniel Pink called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And the point he makes is that most of us are not really motivated by a carrot or a stick. Like a bonus isn't probably going to change your behavior dramatically, and having your permanent record threatened is probably not going to affect us in the slightest. But the things that really motivate us, most of the people here, I would say, are wanting autonomy, wanting control over their work and their lives, mastery, wanting to become really good at what we do, and purpose, wanting to be part of something that's bigger than ourselves. And I think that that's a reasonable kind of descriptor for what motivates most of us. So then we need to think about teamwork. Why do we even care about teamwork? Well, teamwork is really the only way that we're going to access and use synergies. And we care about synergies because synergies allow us to multiply our time, our resources, and our efforts. And it's really important to remember that there are a lot of things in medicine and in academics that are zero-sum games, like the schedule is definitely, and the finances are definitely, but success is not a zero-sum game. If one of us succeeds, that doesn't mean that somebody else can't succeed. We can all succeed, and in fact, if one of us succeeds, that's really good for all of us. So here's Petra Lewis, who's winning the ACER Award this year. And why is that good for me, right? Because I didn't win it this year. It's good because that means our reputation at Dartmouth improves, and specifically, our reputation for education improves. And that means that people want to be at Dartmouth, and they have this sense that Dartmouth is an interesting place to be. So people want to collaborate with us. There are opportunities to do interesting things, and everybody's stature really increases by somebody being recognized at your own institution. Reputation matters. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this place. It's near us. It's in our neighborhood. We're not aligned exactly. So how does this relate to your leader or the person that you theoretically would manage up, right? Well, the leader or the chair also gains by the accomplishments of their department. And that's one measure by which they're evaluated by the institution as well as by their own peers. Being valued by the institution, why do we care? Because that means resources. Resources is a catchphrase for money. So that's really important. If you want programs to happen in your department, this is kind of the cascade, how you get resources into the department. And so what you want to do to help your chair be successful And remember, we want our chair to be successful because that helps all of us. We want to give them the information that they need in order to lead the department to success. We want to give them the specific content they need so that they can report the success of the department. And so what does that mean? The information they need is what went well and what failed. In general, when you go to your leader or your chair, you want to come with solutions, not just problems, because after a while you come with just problems and they're not happy to see you anymore. Don't make it more complicated. Before you go see them, pull the data, analyze the data, then go to them with your ideas and offer to participate in the solution. So you want to look for ways to build on what's been done before. Now, giving them the content they need to report success, okay, this is the part that you might consider the art of gentle self-promotion. Your chairman doesn't necessarily know about all the great things that you've done or the great things that your partners have done, and they need to know that. They don't just need to know that for you and your advancement, they need to know that for the success of the whole department. And so when you get an email that says, hey, you gave a great talk and my residents all really loved it, you send that to your chair so that they have it, so that when they're in a meeting, they can say, yes, we've been getting kudos from these outside institutions about our speakers, and we have this outstanding person in our department. And suggest venues for them to recognize and celebrate success so that within the department, there are ways that everybody can support each other and find synergies. So that was the easy part, right? That's all pretty simple. How do we help our leaders to follow that advice? And we're the Geisel School, so I got a few Dr. Seuss things that I'm going to pull out for the whole week. What is the goal? The goal is to help our leaders be the best that they can be. Our goal is not to manage our leaders to advance our own careers. That is really not the point. There was an interesting article, and yes, I now read the McKinsey Quarterly, which is really excellent. And what this article by Robert Kaplan talked about was that as executives get more senior, they don't get much constructive feedback. I mean, who is going to sit in a meeting with their chairman and say, that last meeting you held was terrible, and you're a bad communicator, and I think you're doing a rotten job. I mean, obviously no one is going to do that. But it's really important for chairs to have honest feedback, and so that's a goal. That's not managing up. That is contributing to the success of the department. But you have to find a way to do that, and I can't really give you instructions for how to do that because that has to do with relationships. Kaplan's advice is specifically to cultivate junior coaches, so to cultivate people that are junior to you, that are willing to speak to you honestly and openly about your own performance. And ideally, if you're doing that, that is also something that your chair is going to see and is going to do. Practice self-disclosure, and this is, to the executive leader. Improve your ability to frame and discuss key questions. And this last one about assess your business with a clean sheet of paper is a really interesting idea. And what that means is, if you were designing a department right now, would it look like the department you're in, or would it look different? So it's kind of a different way of getting a perspective on the work that you're doing. And as a program director, you can certainly do that. Really, at any level, you can do that. You can look at your work and say, if I was walking into a brand new job today, and I wanted it to be successful, and I wanted it to be the best it could be, would it look like it does? Or what changes do I need to make? And I think that's a useful way to do it. Now, can you help your leader get there? And this does kind of go back to that really busy, ugly slide about things you need to do to manage up. I don't think you can do it unless you understand the weaknesses and strengths, perspective, et cetera, about your chair. I think it's worth taking the advice that you want to give and reporting the results. And I'll tell you an example of, I was thinking about this talk, and I had a meeting with my chair and somebody else in the department, and we were going to go as part of our attempt to rule the world, and we were meeting with a smaller practice. And so all of us were talking, and then afterwards I was thinking about it, and I thought it had gone pretty well. But thinking specifically about this talk, I asked the people in the meeting afterwards, did I say anything that made you cringe? Did I say anything that wasn't helpful? Is there any way that could have gone better? And so, in a sense, what I'm trying to do is model the behavior of looking for feedback, even though those people were not my juniors, but model the behavior of looking for feedback. And it turns out that meeting went really well because by the end of the day, we were kind of engaged, us and them. We were dating, and now we're engaged. So that was really good. You want to be sure that you're both going in the same direction and not going in different directions. That's pretty basic. We often start with the assumption that we share the same goals. Don't assume that. Make sure you share the same goals, because that's really important. And this gets maybe into a little bit of admin babble here, but you do want to look at what the strategic goals are of the institution and of the department, because you want them to be aligned. But you also want to make sure that your own career goals are congruent with those goals, because if they're not, you may just need to leave. That may not be the right place for you to be working. So you want to think in terms of a strategic plan for your own career that's specific. You don't have to share it with anybody. It may be that you're not really comfortable saying, someday I want to be a department chair. People often don't want to say that. But if you have a sense of where you want to end up, then you make decisions based on your goals and on your plan. And then you know that you're going in the same direction. And this is from Dr. Seuss. If things start happening, don't worry, don't stew, just go right along and you'll start happening too. Thank you.
So we will have time for questions at the end for all three of our speakers. And now Dr. Collins, the power of nice.
Okay. How do I make that keystone go away? Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. That was excellent advice, Jocelyn. It's always nice to learn something in the audience, and I'm sure everyone here did learn many things from your talk. I'm charged with talking about how to negotiate, and I'd like to say right off that what I say is not just going to be relevant to negotiating at work, but you might find some of what I have to say relevant to your home life, to your personal life as well. Much of what I will talk about will come from this book called The Power of Nice. It's a relatively quick read. It's written in a very in a manner that's easily understood and has many different examples that pertain to the real world. So I think you would enjoy it. If you like this talk, you might want to get that book and look at it closer. The best way to get what you want is to help the other side get what they want. This talk is about relationships. I'd like to rename it from how to negotiate to how to build relationships, because the power of negotiation is all about building relationships. That's what I want to emphasize. What you want is not win-lose, and contrary to what you may have learned, you don't even want big win, big win. I'm not even sure that's possible. But as much as you can achieve this, you should try to achieve big win, little win, and all the better if you get the big win. If someone loses, they have no investment. As soon as that deal's over, they're out. No relationship, nothing for the future. You just made your first and last deal. You won the battle, not the war. Now, I'm hoping that you're willing to play along here. You're all sitting next to someone, so please recruit someone that you're next to play along with you. It's not going to take long. It's going to take 30 seconds. Now listen closely to the instructions. I'm giving you, your pair, 10 $1 bills. You have to, in 30 seconds, divide that between the two of you. And here are the rules. You can't split it $5 and $5. You can't say $7 to you, 3 to me, or 6 to you, 4 to me, and then make a side deal and adjust that later. And if you don't make a deal in 30 seconds, I take all $10 back. Okay? Go. Okay, stop. Time's up. Time's up. Stop talking. Nope, nope, nope. No more. No more. No more, no more, no more. Okay. How many people made a deal? Good? All right. Good. Now, here's the kind of deals that I often see get made. And if we had time, we could talk about how you divided your money. I'm not going to take the time now, but in the future, if you want to try this game on another audience, this is something you can do. But this is sometimes how things work out. The hard sell, I call this. So it's better for one of us to get it than neither of us, so let's make it me. Yeah. I agree, as long as that one is me. Or the soft sell. Oh gosh, whatever you think is fair. Well, golly, how about 7 for me and say 3 for you? Okay. How many, let me go back. How many resorted to the hard sell? Anyone? No? Okay. Any the soft sell? No one? Okay. How about the sympathy ploy? I need the $10. I just ran out of gas. Well, at least you have a car. Anyone there? Anyone give up the whole $10? No? Okay. The so-called logic ploy. We've got 30 seconds. So you take 4, I'll take 6. We'll both come out ahead. Anybody? No? Okay, a few. All right. Okay. The trust me ploy. Give me all 10 and I'll make it up to you later. Trust me. Anybody? No? Okay. Well, before I tell you other ways this could have happened, let me tell you why negotiations often don't work. They don't work out optimally if you only have 30 seconds. That's part of the problem with many negotiations, is not having enough time to think, but only enough time to react. And when you have time pressure and no preparation time, you revert to your old habits, often not good ones. And most people revert to the habit of I win, you lose, because it's always better to win. And we think that negotiation is about win-lose, but I already told you at the beginning, the best negotiations are about big win, little win. Sometimes I win, you lose turns into I lose, you win. I'll take 2, you take 8, in order to just make a deal. And then you lose too much. So, the goal should always be win-win. Both people win, you build a relationship. Both parties have an investment in that deal. You are dating. Right, Jocelyn? And the goal is to get engaged, a long-term relationship. So how do you achieve that? Find out what the other person's interests are. Know what your interests are. Before you go into a meeting to negotiate something, decide what your priorities are. What can you live with? What can you live without? Try not to give away any more than you have to. Get the most of a good deal, not the least of a bad deal. And by the way, I may sound very pedagogic, but let me admit to you, I have not always made the best deals. This is really an art that I try to practice now to get better. So one of the keys I think is very helpful in negotiating better is to find a way to agree. So you know that if you don't make a deal in 30 seconds, you both get nothing. So how about this? What we both want is much as we can get. So let's give 4 to each. And that means we're only negotiating over $2. We've taken care of 8. We're both going to get $4. So if you can find common ground, get that out of the way, then you already have, in some ways, a win-win. Take the ego out of it. So how about a coin flip? Heads, I get 6, you get 4. Tails, you get 6, I get 4. Now you have an equal chance to win. Or how about be creative? No one said you can't make change, so did anybody think of this? Split the money to $4.99 and $5.01? That's only a 2-cent windfall. How can that not be a win-win? We often don't think about these things, especially when we only have 30 seconds. That's why time to prepare is so important. Or increase the pie. So I didn't say that you couldn't put $1 in. Now you're dividing $11. Then you take 6 and the other takes 5. All I said was one can't take 5 and the other take 5. I didn't say you couldn't put $1 and make it 11 and then take 6. That's creativity. Remember that it's not the sale, it's the relationship that counts. I didn't make that up. So think about prior negotiations that you were involved in that were one-time deals with no chance for future deals. No openings for repeat business for an ongoing relationship. Those represent lost opportunities. You have nothing to lose by assuming you might do business again. How often have you done business again with someone that you did business a lifetime ago? Awarded a job to someone who was the runner-up last time? Discovered a familiar name as a reference on a resume? Called on an old acquaintance for an opinion? Hired a competitor? You may not get everything you wanted out of this deal today, but by building a relationship, you may get what you need out of a deal next year or 5 years from now. Something I'm going to bring up again later in my talk is that when you build a relationship, when you are friends with someone, it's hard not to want to work with that person. It's hard for them to say no to you. Think about that. We want to help our friends. We want to help them get what they want and what they need. That's why relationships are so important to negotiation. Nature has given men one tongue but 2 ears, that we may hear from others twice as much as we speak. That's important because we need to know what the other person needs, so we need to listen to them. We need to probe and find out what their interests are. Not because we're trying to be devious, but because we truly want them to win. And if you give someone a chance to tell you everything you need to know, they will. Ask them questions, listen more than you talk. Every moment you're not talking is an opportunity to learn what it takes to make the deal. The best negotiators aren't smooth talkers, they're smooth listeners. And listening isn't just waiting to talk. Mark Twain said, "When you need a friend, it's too late to make one." So, by bonding, you find out what you have in common, rather than where you're at odds. You get $4, I get $4. We both want at least $4. That's in common. Great. Let's move on from there. When you reach an impasse with someone you don't like or don't know, you're more likely to let the impasse stand. When the same situation occurs with someone whom you've come to know, understand, and even like, you're going to look for ways to get past the deadlock. Again, building a relationship. So with the power of nice, you can make deals, build relationships, and make more deals. Sales pay one-time profits. Relationships pay dividends. Relationships pay dividends. So, when are we tempted to cross over to that win-lose? When someone hurts you and you want to strike back. That's not a friend. That's not a you don't have a good relationship with that person. Or you want to teach someone a lesson. Or you think you have the upper hand and you underestimate the power of your competitor or enemy or whoever you're negotiating with who's not your friend. This is even made worse when you don't have time to prepare, when you only have 30 seconds. This is when the CEO comes to you as the chair and says, your department's going to do this. I don't care what the ramifications are, because this is what I want you to do. And you have no positive relationship with that person, that's difficult negotiation. Very difficult. So how do you win-win? You identify your interests, and before you go into the negotiation, ask yourself what you want out of it, and then challenge your answers. Make sure that you know what your priorities are. Rank your needs. Know what you can live without. If this is really important, if this is high stakes, do some role playing. Get someone to sit down and be the other side. Find out what can happen. Let someone tell you how you come across. Are you really coming across as someone who wants to make a deal because you want to help them, or you're just out to get what you want and what you need? Because that turns people off in the negotiation process. But it may be something you don't realize about the way you come across to other people. And it's a process, not an event. So don't go into a meeting until you know everything you can about your position, evidence for and against you, comparable situations in the past and present, what you're aiming for, what you're willing to settle for, and all you can about the other side. Listen, 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 and find out what the other person needs. So, how do I put this into practice? Let me give you one example. When the residents in my program ask me for something, they want more money, they want more time off, to go to a meeting, whatever. My first thought is not yes. My first thought is not no. My first thought is, gee, I wonder what other programs do. Are we part of that middle ground where we're at least keeping up with other programs? Are we offering more than other programs offer already? Are we behind, way behind what other programs offer? It's an opportunity to find out whether you're doing the best for your residents, whether you're providing as much as you should be for your residents. So it's never, for me, an issue of answering one question. It really opens up the question of a broader issue. And and it makes it fair. It's not an ego thing. I'm not making this decision unilaterally. I'm asking the opinions of my colleagues. I'm asking the opinions of my colleagues not only in my department, but out there in the broad radiology residency world. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. So, as you're probing people for information, don't assume you know what their position is. Don't offend people, like sometimes happens if it comes off as interrogation. And if you're really listening to someone, you don't have to worry about getting off track and having to slow down. Because if we're really carefully listening to someone, that's exactly what we're doing. Once in a while, you get that person who never read this book. Don't let ego play a part of it, because in my experience, that never works out well. Remember, that's one of the pitfalls of negotiation. Trying to get back at someone, it never works out well. Take a time out if you need to. Understand what that person's pressures are. Acknowledge what their concerns are. And if you're really looking at a win-win, you don't have to worry about them saving face. They're not going to lose face if it's a win-win. Let me tell you about another personal experience of mine. It's been 2 or 3 years ago now, and I was negotiating to get a contract to do the imaging at a hospital up north. And at the time, it was a private practice group that was performing the imaging for that hospital. Why I thought it was so important for my group to be doing it was because that hospital was part of our health system. I'd only been the chair for a short period of time. There was a lot of history that had occurred before I got there. There was a huge amount of politics in making this decision. And it became clear to me that that was not going to happen, that we were not going to get that contract. Now, I could have demanded, you give that to me. This is our health system. You hire within. You don't go out there, the outside, and bring some other group in. And if you do that, I'm leaving. I could have said that. I could have just hid under my bed and said, okay, you win. I don't like you because you did this to me, but you forced me to give in. And then I'd be mad. And I could be mad for the next 3 years until it comes time to renew that contract. But I knew even back then, before I even read this book, that I needed to build a relationship. I do not want to be an enemy with the people who are making that decision. Because if I don't get it now, I darn well better get it 3 years from now, because then I will have been the chair for a long enough period of time that I can say, listen, you can't do this now, and this is why. I've proven myself here over the last 3 years. And I didn't stop there. Okay, I played nice. I made my case, played nice, accepted the decision, but I didn't stop there. What I said was, but maybe you can give me a little bit. How about breast imaging? Can I have the breast imaging now? And I got it. And you know what? We've done great. That volume in breast imaging has more than doubled. They had to dust off their MR coils so we could do that type of an exam at that hospital. Time and again, over the last years now, we have demonstrated to them that we can not only provide as good a service as that other group, but we can excel, we can provide better service than that other group. Now, there is no way we're not getting this contract next time. And it's not just because we've demonstrated better service, but because the CEOs, they're friends of mine. They would have a hard time looking at me in the face after I've brought this up every time we've met over the last 3 years and telling me they're not going to give this to me. That's what I mean by a relationship, and that's why it's important. If you're dealing with an enemy, one of the things that can work is to bring in a partner. Someone that maybe acts as a mediator. Or someone who has knowledge that neither you or the other person in the negotiation has. Remember, the process is negotiation, not egociation. Sometimes the other party, again, has not read this book. I've had that experience. But I can tell you that it is never better to give up and say, okay, you win, but I don't like you and I will never like you. You will never get what you need by going down that road. And besides which, I've never known any CEO position where the same person was in that position forever. someone else is going to come along. So here are the take-home pearls. Prepare. Know what your needs are. Know something about the interests of the other side. Probe. Listen. Have a proposal. One in which both sides will win. And lastly, build a relationship. If you learn nothing else from what I've said today, learn that this is all about, negotiation is all about building relationships. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful. And I learned that I do not want to negotiate with you. Did you say what? I said I don't want to negotiate with you. But I'll get the little win. So it really is an honor to be here today with this distinguished panel talking to you about leadership styles and traits. I'm also cognizant of the fact that I have the dubious distinction of being the last thing remaining between you and the beer and pretzels reception, so I thank you for being here and for your attention. I'll try and make it worth your while. The objectives of my talk are to discuss the leadership and management challenges that we all face and describe the benefits of delegation as a tool to drive organizational success. I'll attempt to provide some guidelines for you on what to delegate and how to delegate, and finally suggest some tips and highlight some potential pitfalls. So by way of introduction, I come to you from the North Shore LIJ Health System, one of the largest integrated health systems in the United States. And I show you this slide just to give you a feel for the sheer number of sites and the geographic dispersions, which creates some challenges of its own. Because of the nature of our health system, I've had the opportunity to develop quite a bit of experience over the last few years with delegation, and I think that's probably the only way you can learn is through experience, through trial and error. So like most of you, our health system is going through rapid transformation, and we're well on our way to transitioning both the way that we deliver care and the way that we're paid for that care. And I think this presents a tremendous opportunity for physician leadership. Now's the time for us to rethink everything that we do. Try and start with that clean sheet of paper, as was mentioned earlier, and question everything that we do, why we do it, is there a better way, can we do it with better quality for a lesser cost? But that's easier said than done, and although we're far along in our transformation, we have our own insurance company and we've taken on many very complicated managed care contracts where we assume financial risk. I'll be free to admit to you, we have not figured this out yet and are still spending much of our time trying to figure out the right way to do this. So we need leaders, and by leadership I mean true leadership, not management. And there's a lot of people talk about leadership and management somewhat synonymously, but I see them as intrinsically related but different. Leaders define the mission of the organization. They create the vision. They steer the ship. It's a 30,000-foot view, if you will. It's much more about creating strategic plans and creating an environment where people have the resources to succeed. Most of us spend time both as leaders and managers. Management is important, but it's much more tactical. It's developing and executing plans to achieve those objectives, more bottom line focused. But in times that are turbulent like these, where everything is changing around us, we need to make sure that we give ourselves the time, our most precious resource, which is time, to think. Because otherwise what we find ourselves doing is just more and more of the same more efficiently. Peter Drucker has described the difference between management and leadership this way. Management is doing things right, whereas leadership is doing the right things. Somewhat more cynically, you could point to the analogy of management without leadership is like rearranging the desk chairs on the Titanic. You know, in times like this, when people tend to focus on productivity and turnaround times and things that really don't matter in the big picture, I think that it's incumbent on us to remember that it's all about leadership. This is why time management is so important. We don't have enough time to do everything that's important. So we need time management skills to allow us to spend more time leading and less time managing. Stephen Covey, in his bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, created a framework for thinking about time management along two domains: the importance of our activities and the urgency of our activities. And if we're not careful, we spend all of our time focusing on the urgent and not on the important. And if you don't have good time management skills, you'll spend most of your time putting out fires, dealing with crises, and facing imminent deadlines. Whereas where you really want to be is in quadrant 2, where you're dealing with the important but not urgent things, like looking for new opportunities and develop long-range plans. I encourage everyone to occasionally write down all of your daily activities for a short period of time. I've done this thinking that it wouldn't be very valuable, but you find that when you write down everything that you do, I think you'll be amazed to find out how much you do doesn't add value. And the best opportunity to reclaim your time is to find all those activities that are unnecessary and just stop doing them. Then you could take what's left and divide it among what are the things that truly only you can do as a leader, and what are the things that you can delegate to others? What do other people have the skills to do, or that with minimal training that they can take on? You can think about delegation as a tool, like a lever, that will multiply your effort and magnify your efficiency and results. To delegate is to choose someone to do something, is to give control, responsibility, or authority to someone, or to trust someone with a job or a duty. I've underlined to give and to trust, because delegation, sometimes people don't delegate it because they think that they're dumping on their subordinates. It's not that at all. It's actually a gift to give your subordinates the opportunity to grow. Delegation is also definitely not abdication. It's entrusting others with a task or function that remains the delegator's ultimate responsibility. That's critically important. You don't assign a task and then walk away. You're ultimately responsible. Delegation has multiple benefits for the entire organization. For the leader, it gives you more time to focus on the big picture. It gives you the opportunity to develop human capital, which after all is any organization's most valuable resource. And it's an opportunity to assess staff abilities prior to promotion, a tryout, if you will. Staff members benefit from delegation by having the opportunity to develop new skills in a comfortable environment, and it's also powerful motivation. When someone takes on the ownership of a task and they see it through to completion, not only do they build the technical capabilities in the process, but it helps them build their confidence and self-esteem. Finally, the team benefits through improved communication, coordination, and trust, and I've found that it actually leads to better solutions. Leaders often are too far removed from the front lines, and when you engage people who do the work themselves on a daily basis, they're far more likely to understand the day-to-day impediments that will prevent successful implementation of a plan. And finally, as much as we'd like to believe we know best, leaders don't. The more people that you engage in problem solving, the better solutions you'll come up with. So if delegation is so great, why do people struggle with it so much? I think one reason people struggle with delegation is just inexperience. If you think about how you got promoted or how other people around you got promoted, it's frequently because of technical excellence or individual achievement. You can think of an interventional radiologist who's technically gifted becoming a division chief, or an investigator who's published the most papers becoming a vice chair of research. Where these things are critically important, they don't necessarily translate to getting the best performance out of a team. The good news is delegation is a skill that can be learned. Another thing that holds people back is misconceptions. Leaders frequently feel that it's easier to do things themselves, and that's true. It is easier to do things yourself once. But teaching people to delegate will free up much more time in the long run, and ultimately it's time well spent. The time it takes to coach and to teach will pay dividends down the road. You have to take the long view. And another misconception that leaders have is that only they know the right way. I'm sure you've all dealt with leaders who are like this, and they're not particularly good leaders to work with. But we just need to recognize that in ourselves and try to not let that get the best of us. Those who don't delegate are susceptible to fall into an activity trap where you feel overwhelmed. When you feel overwhelmed, you might feel too busy to delegate, which will lead you to try and do everything yourself, which will lead you to fall further behind, which will make you feel more overwhelmed, and so on in a self-fulfilling vicious circle. I think the worst reason that people don't delegate is insecurity. Leaders often fear being replaceable. But this is ironic, because people who fail to delegate almost guarantee their own failure. which will lead to them being removed, which is the thing that they most fear in the first place. The first couple of pitfalls I spoke about are people fearing that their people will fail. This is a fear that your people will succeed, which is really a terrible trait for a leader. So what are some of the warning signs that you might see in yourself? Because sometimes leaders think that they do everything well, and delegation seems like a relatively easy thing to do. So I ask yourself to ask is this true of you? The number one warning sign, in my opinion, of someone who's not delegating enough is someone who just cannot get away. If you can't take a vacation, if you can't come to a conference like this for a few days without fear that things are going to fall apart, or if that problems arise that people don't understand what you would want them to do, then you're not delegating enough. If the leader is overwhelmed with work, doesn't have time for the big picture, falling behind, or micromanaging their staff, they're not delegating properly. The staff can show warning signs, either incomplete assignments or poor quality work, a disengaged staff that demonstrates low morale. That's a warning sign that you're not delegating. Jocelyn mentioned earlier about some of the signs of motivation. Delegating work to people is a big motivator, and if you're not delegating enough, your staff is going to they're going to have low morale, and that will lead to high turnover. So they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and this is sort of a dry topic, so I figured I'd walk around the department and try and take some pictures of some things that I saw as warning signs. One telltale sign is the overflowing inbox. Another is the leader who takes on so much responsibility that they have to take multitasking to a whole new level. And possibly the worst of all is the chair who feels like they have to try and do everything themselves. This poor unfortunate chair is trying to fix some equipment. So delegation is very simple conceptually. It's really all about picking the right people, matching those people with appropriate tasks, and then supporting them with resources and cultivating the environment. It's simple, but it requires forethought and preparation. Because without the proper forethought and preparation, what happens is you, in the hallway, pass somebody and tell them, I need this done, walk away, and that's not delegation. That's abdication. So I've tried to condense delegation to 7 easy steps, which I've adapted from one book called Delegating Work, which is from Harvard Business Press. Just to give you a framework, next time you do some delegating, to try and think about these steps and ask yourself, do you follow through on all of these things? So step 1 is to decide what to delegate. 2 is to assess the required skills. 3 is to identify the right people. 4 is to structure the assignment. 5 is to communicate the assignment. 6 is to monitor progress. And 7 is review the outcome. And we'll go through these in detail. So step 1 is to decide what to delegate. As I mentioned, routine tasks, projects that others have the skills to complete, or functions that others can learn with minimal training, these things should be delegated. Just as importantly, things that you should not delegate are the true functions of a leader. You should not delegate steering the ship. The vision is the responsibility of the leadership of the department or the organization. That really can't be delegated. High-level HR decision-making, hiring, firing, and promotion decisions really shouldn't be delegated. And then there are the few and far between projects that truly require your skills. The second thing you want to do is when you look at a project is try and assess the skills that are required. These can be intellectual, technical, or interpersonal skills, usually a combination of the 3. You should think to yourself, do I need someone with a financial background? Do I need someone with operational expertise? What kind of person do I need? Do I need someone who's a good communicator or a consensus builder? You may not be able to find all of these things in one person, and it's okay to team people, different individuals up with complementary skill sets. Where I start is I try to identify individuals who demonstrate initiative. To me, there's no better predictor of success than someone who has drive and has shown interest in the past and shown that they can carry through a project successfully in the past. I consider an individual's stated interests and their abilities, which sometimes don't match. It's okay if someone's interested in developing a business plan, but if they've got no financial background, they might not be the best person to lead the team. Put them on the team, but don't necessarily put them in the lead right out of the gate. One other thing to consider is their availability. You don't want people to bite off more than they can chew, because then they won't be successful in completing the project, but you also don't want people to bow out because they feel that they're overwhelmed. Often this is a great opportunity to teach your staff their own delegation skills. Sometimes when someone comes to me and says, I'd love to take that on, but I'm just too busy, my next question to them is, are you feeling challenged in your work? Because if the answer to that is no, then they should offload some of their routine work to free up the time to take on this challenging task to help them grow. So then, to me, again, the most important part of delegation is identifying the right people. In his famous book, Good to Great, Jim Collins said that great managers get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and get the right people in the right seats on the bus. To me, this is 90% of successful delegation. I would encourage you to create a table of organization that outlines the responsibility and authority structure in the department. Everyone has clear lines of responsibilities. Every one of these boxes has a whole huge team of people reporting to them, and you can see that the person at the top can't accomplish anything if they're not delegating responsibility and authority to people below. The next step is to structure the assignment. You need to be very clear about the assignment before you communicate the assignment. What are the objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Who's going to be on the team? An important one is resources. I like to think about this in terms of time, money, equipment, and information. Don't underestimate the value of information. Some information in your organization is held pretty tightly, and you have to share it. You should be clear about what the timeline and deliverables are and what the outcome measures are. You should know how you're going to judge the success of a project before you delegate it based on clear metrics. Now it's time to communicate the assignment. This should be done face-to-face. You sit the person down, and you need to be clear and definitive about the expectations. You should explain the purpose and background. It's not enough to say, I need this done. For someone to be fully engaged and take ownership of a project, they should understand how it fits into your strategy. If they believe that it's critically important to the department, they're going to be much more engaged. Also, it's helpful to explain to a person why you chose them. That helps convey trust and confidence in the person, and it lets them know you're not just dumping this project on them because you're too busy, but actually they have the skills to do what needs to be done. Finally, describe the assignment as a framework. I would encourage you to focus on the objectives and allow for flexibility. Don't be prescriptive about how things should get done. Let the people know what you want to accomplish and let them surprise you with their creativity. You need to discuss the limits of granted authority, not just with the individual, but with the rest of the department. People need to know that this person is in charge. They need to know the limits of their budget. How much money can they spend on their own, or at what point do they need to come back and talk to you? They should have a good sense of the goals, metrics, and timelines. And at this point, the best thing you can do is sit back and listen. Don't assume that the person has heard what you think you have said. You may think that you've clearly communicated, and the other person may have heard something completely different. So I would advise you to ask the person in their own words to try and summarize what they think are the outcomes you're looking for, and to throw out a few ideas for how they might accomplish them. It's also a good opportunity for that person to push back on the resources that you're prepared to commit. You may have underestimated the resources, or they may think that there are obstacles that you haven't seen. It's a good time to have that give and take. Assuming you've gotten through that, then you can secure commitment and propose open communication and follow-up going forward. One of the biggest mistakes people make in delegation is they leave the room at that point and think they're done. The leader is not done at this point. The hard work is left to be done. The leader is responsible for monitoring the progress. You want to trust but verify. You want to make sure that that other person understands this going into the project, that you trust them, that you have confidence in them. But you at the outset schedule meetings for regular follow-up, and you explain that this is not because you don't trust them, but it's just to review the milestones and make sure that they're on track and to help them through any problems that they might run into. You should look for signs of failure, provide support and mentoring, and resist the urge to solve the problem. Often leaders try to take the project back. Some quick do's and don'ts: make sure you're available, make sure you ask a lot of questions, and encourage the individual to make their own decisions. Don't convey mistrust, and whatever you do, don't try and solve their problems or take the project back. When you do that, you do several things. One, you frustrate the employee. The whole point of delegation is to empower people. If you micromanage and take it back because only you know the right way to do that, you frustrate people. The other thing is you've wasted their time and your time. The point of delegation is to stretch people and to free up your time. If you take a project back and do it yourself, you've defeated the purpose. Beware of reverse delegation. In a seminal paper written in the Harvard Business Review in 1974, William Onken wrote an article called Who's Got the Monkey?, where he likened delegates' problems to monkeys on their back. And when one of your workers comes to you and says that they are experiencing problems, it's entirely possible that the monkey will jump from their back onto your back. And that's what you want to avoid. So, just as was stated earlier, the best way to avoid this potential pitfall is to tell your people you have an open door, you want to discuss their problems. But if they come to you with a problem, they should have at least 2 potential solutions. Don't solve their problems for them. Help them think through their problems and let them grow in the process. Finally, you want to review the outcome, and again, go back to the metrics. This should be completely objective. It's about the outcome. Don't second-guess the methodology. You want to provide feedback. Mistakes will happen. If you're afraid of people making mistakes, then you'll never be a good delegator. You want to avoid blame and treat mistakes as growth opportunities. Finally, you want to share credit. There's no greater motivator than when you take a junior faculty member and you share with their peers, or even better yet, your leadership, what a wonderful job they did. If you have the opportunity to allow somebody to present the work that they did to your boss, then that will provide tremendous motivation and sustain the kind of growth you want to see in your department. So I just want to summarize a few tips and pitfalls to think about. One is choose the tasks and people wisely. Have faith in the people you choose and set high expectations. Going back to that beginning misconception that only you know how to do things the right way, I believe that if you pick the right people and you set expectations very high, those people will surprise you. They will rise to the level of your expectations and often exceed them. Exercise principled delegation. This seems obvious, but it's worth stating that you should never ask people to do things that you wouldn't do yourself. Give ownership for the projects that you assign. Try to delegate an entire task to one person. It's the best way for an individual to grow, and it's the most efficient and likely to succeed. Some people say that when multiple people own a project, no one owns the project, and I've found that to be true. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Most failures in delegation arise from a failure to communicate. Don't be impatient. Delegation takes time. This is a wise investment of your time that will pay dividends in the future. The other downside of being impatient is that perceived impatience will discourage staff members from asking questions, and when they don't ask you questions, they're likely to make mistakes, which will cost you in the long run. Don't micromanage. This is really hard for leaders. But be clear and consistent, describe the problem and set goalposts. Ask questions, don't tell people how to do things. And then the hardest part for most leaders is let go. Finally, the best thing you can do at the end is to reinforce what you've done through recognition and reward. When praise is due, give praise often and publicly, and wherever possible, try to link compensation and promotion to results. So some final thoughts from 2 great leaders. Theodore Roosevelt has said, the best executive is the one who has the sense enough to pick good men or people to do what he wants done and self-restraint enough to keep from meddling with them while they do it. And General Patton said, never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. If our 3 speakers could come up so we can have access to your knowledge and wisdom. If anyone has questions, this would be the time to ask them. Dr. Chertoff, one question that came to me as Dr. Nage was talking was, when your leaders are micromanaging, is there a skill that you can help them when you're trying to manage up that will give them a little hint of not micromanaging, if that makes sense?
You know, I mean, at one point I had to say, look, you can do it or I can do it, but we can't both do it. And sometimes I think it's really important to try to just be able to speak frankly with your leader, if at all possible. And sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you have somebody that just won't interact with you that way. And I think if you find repeatedly that you're being micromanaged and you can't get anywhere with it, you need to think about leaving. That may just not be a situation that you can stay in. But it's very frustrating. And I've definitely had the experience of simultaneously working on a project and having the person that assigned it to me in his office next to me also working on the same project. And it's just a waste of time. You can't allow it.
Any questions from the audience?
The delegation talk, I'm actually bringing up a situation that I was in. I'm asking for some clues here. We were working on a paper, and the resident, and then the resident up front communicated willingness to post off the paper. I had communicated that that's kind of early. Let's go through the project. Let's see how responsibilities are, how you go through the responsibilities, and be happy to delegate the first officer person to do the most work, which I thought was the right way to do it. And I'm here because I don't know better. I'm trying to learn. Through the project, we realized that there were some data integrity issues, and I picked up on that, and we had a discussion. The first draft that was submitted to me was also did not even have the key references, very basic, simple references from AGR and radiology that were well known, and sort of, I did the mistake that you, Luke, said not to do, was I took the project back. But I sort of at that point found myself in a dilemma, in a moral dilemma, and how to proceed. That actually stalled the project. It was still stalled. So I'm just seeking. I did not know how to handle the situation.
Well, I think you raise a lot of the challenges of delegation and what makes it so difficult. I think to address the first question of your assumption about first authorship, I think that sometimes it's helpful to almost write a contract at the beginning of what your understanding of the project is going to be. I think it's helpful to, as I said, sit down face-to-face with the person and ask them to, in their own words, say what they think the expectations or the outcome. So that goes right back to the outcome. If the outcome is going to be a paper, who is going to be writing the paper? I think that's a critically important thing to discuss up front, but you want to make sure that there's clear communication so that that's not a surprise after the fact. In terms of data integrity issues, I think that comes to that point of picking the right person. So it may be that the failure point here was picking somebody who wasn't ready to take on this challenge by themselves and not providing enough oversight. I think that if someone is over their head, sometimes you do have to take a project back. I think what I meant by not taking the project back is don't take the project back if the person is up for the challenge. But clearly, sometimes we make a mistake at the earlier step of picking the right person. And if you overestimated someone's abilities and or their own personal integrity, sometimes you do have, because you do have the ultimate responsibility as the person in charge. So I think you did the right thing.
This is for Dr. Collins. On your $5 and $10 split, my first reaction was one that you didn't mention, which is I take 2 and he would take 8. And the reason I immediately went to that, I noticed you employed that same strategy with the hospital, because you took 2 and they took 8 because you took the mammography. That was the 2, because it was my first deal. And I wanted to make the second. So what I was interested in was not winning that, I was winning the relationship. So that's an option you didn't mention, but I noticed you used it in your negotiation.
Yeah, well, good. It's very creative on your part, Wally. Yeah, and so, you had determined what you needed, what you're willing to live with, what you're willing to live without, within the bounds of what you thought were the possibilities. And good for you, knowing that Pedro there was going to be insistent on taking the whole 10, because that's how he is. Well, that's just stupid. But my situation was I felt like I wasn't going to get anything. They were going to take all 10, and they had enough big guys backing them up that I was just not going to change that. So I went in and said, maybe you've not thought of this, but maybe I can get 2, which sounds like what you did.
Making any offer of disability and trust, versus not having a conversation from the start of what you're going to do or take. Like you mentioned, the relationship is part of building a relationship, just when you're trusting the person and then.
Well, somehow you just need to figure out a way where you're going to work together. It's not going to be the end. So my goal was somehow we were going to be in the same room every month or every 2 months, working on something together. So they weren't just going to forget about me, and then all of a sudden they're going to see me again in 3 years, because that's not going to accomplish what I want. So whether it's getting breast imaging, or whether they're going to put me on some big committee that I'm going to work with them on, or some other project, or somehow I'm going to get something out of it so that we build this relationship. I mean, I picked something that I pretty much knew the other radiology team was not going to argue too big about. If they were asked to give something up, that's probably, they're not going to stand and fight for breast imaging because they saw that as a loss leader, right? Right. Well, turns out we get to do a whole bunch of MR that's a good thing. Build up that business there. Actually, it's been wonderful. All the doctors that didn't have faith in us up there, they do now.
For the whole panel on this one.
Could be anybody. I don't have an answer. That could be any of us. I think it kind of depends on who you're dealing with and what the content is. I think when you come into a place and you're a junior person, the first thing you have to do is kind of prove yourself. And I can tell you, when I interviewed for my job, the best question that I was asked was basically, how are you going to, I think you're a good radiologist, you think you're a good radiologist, how are you going to convince the other people in this institution that you're a good radiologist and that they should listen to you? And so that's really the first thing, is that you have to kind of establish who you are and what you can do and what your skill set is. It's probably a good idea to do what Janie suggested, which is ask them why they're doing things the way they're doing them. Don't say, why are you doing it like that? That's stupid. Say, I need to understand this. This isn't how I would approach it. Tell me about how you're doing this. Tell me about how this works. What works and what doesn't work. Or just work with that person on something where you're not butting heads, something where you get to understand each other's styles. And you may find that they have some experience behind them that led them to manage things in the way that they did. They may also be lacking some skill sets that you have. You know, so, oh, I never give my talks with PowerPoint. Oh, that's interesting, because I don't know how to give my talks with PowerPoint. So you may be able to help them. You know, there may be some reason that's not obvious on the surface, because, you know, you kind of make the assumption, you may go in there thinking, oh, everybody knows how to do this. And I know, you know, for myself, my assumption is always, well, if I know this, everybody knows it, because if I know it, it must be really easy. But that's not the case, you know, so you have to kind of feel it out that way. And for all of these things, I think it's about developing relationships and starting from the assumption that that person has some important skills that they're bringing, you know, and finding out what they are by listening. Want to add anything to that?
So here's another example from my past.
Is there a cricket in here?
Early on as a chair, and I was trying to make some changes in the department, I had someone tell me, there's no way I can make that clinical schedule any other way than I do it right now. There's no way to be more efficient in scheduling the clinical faculty. And if you try to force that on me, then just find someone else to do it. So is that kind of thing you're asking about? So sometimes, and there's no one right way to handle those things, because I'm new and I really don't know much about the background and what that person's relationship with the department has been, or with the other people in the department, or, you know, why he's come to feel the way he does, or... But, you know, so the first thing I try to do is kind of what Jocelyn said, is understand why do you feel that way? What have you tried? And what can we think about that might be, you know, new ideas? What are we trying to accomplish? Bring some different people in the mix. Look at the way other people do it. What I really want is for that person to just work with me. Let's try to think of some new ideas. Let's not just say no, because that's easy for people to do, is to just say no. And then you develop a reputation as the person or the department that just always says no. In fact of the matter, it's almost never an answer of no. There's always, usually, some way of doing something differently, or being in some way able to say yes. The trick is to find that way and to get people to believe you and get on your bus. Sometimes people just need help, though, to think about those things. And this is not something, you know, this is maybe trite to say this, but as much as you can make the solution one of their doing and make them look good, as if it was their idea, man, that is really building a relationship.
Yeah, I see one of my residents is here, and you know, I think my residents have all heard this before, but I think one of the most effective things is to start the conversation by saying yes, even if you know that the answer is going to be no. So the example that I give my residents, and I see sort of smiling, is, you know, they call up and they want some completely ridiculous study, and you say, okay. And you know you're not going to do a head CT for somebody who stubbed their toe. You're not going to do it. But you say, just, you know, I need to tailor it. I need to do the right thing. Just explain a little more to me so that I know how to do this. And then as they talk, you come to understand their perspective. You add a little bit to that conversation. And your goal at the end of the conversation is exactly what Janie said. You will do the right thing, they will think it's their idea. And okay, maybe that's somewhat manipulative or very manipulative, but the point being to start with yes and get to a better yes if you can.
Turning this to Jedi 201
Exactly.
over here. It's good, I like that.
Mind meld.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Dr. Collins, is there,
I think that's so true, Georgianne, and and that's why when this particular person was insistent that the schedule couldn't be done any other way, I stepped back to think, what has led that person to believe that? Because this person's been doing the schedule for umpteen years. It's been working, you know, for the most part, pretty well. I just want to institute some changes. I need to accomplish something, and the current schedule isn't allowing that. So why is it that that person thinks there's no other way to do it? And sometimes it just, you're surprised at what the answers are, because there are certain assumptions, you make certain assumptions, because that faculty person won't do anything else. But maybe that was the way that faculty person was 10 years ago. Maybe that's not the way that faculty person is now, and maybe we just haven't asked that person in a while. Sometimes it's as easy as that. But you're right. You can't just go in there and say, yeah, you're not willing to do it my way? Well, I don't care if you've been doing it for 15 years. I need someone else to do it now. Yeah.
Great. So thank you all. One last plug here. This was brought to you by, oh, no, one second. By Dr. Nadich. No, 1 second here. This was brought to you by Acer. So if you're not a member of Acer, I think we all took away, on average, $5 today. Is that right, Dr. Collins? Right. So we all got $5 in our pocket, but we also have some good leadership lessons. So if you're not a member of Acer, you should be a member of Acer. And thanks, all three of you, for your wisdom.
Good job.
Greatly appreciate it.